Hello, my name is Mark and this is Production Engineering. In today's episode we are going to talk about how to find a good engineer or designer. So, how would we go about this? Well, if you want someone who is a technical person and is going to take the concept, the design concept, and create the correct files, liaise with the manufacturer, solve any questions or make modifications to design based on what the manufacturer says, it's sort of like pretty much someone who looks after your process for you, then a production engineer is who you are after. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have both. You can actually have an excellent designer. I actually use other designers. I engage them to get the actual concept right. It pretty much ends up being a drawing, and we work together working on the actual 3D model to make sure that it actually looks really good. So that's how I use a designer. Then I take that design and make sure that it can be manufactured properly, that if it's an injection molded part, that it will pop out of the mold. If it's a sheet metal part, that we can manufacture in a way where we get the most out of a whole sheet, like stamping or cutting. That's what I do. But what if you don't employ me? Like, what if you get somebody else, which is absolutely fine. Now, a couple of things you need to make sure. You need to make a decision whether it's a designer and you're going to handle the technical side yourself, or whether you're going to get another person to do that. But a good designer you can really make your decision on how good their previous designs are. So you would go onto Freelance or Upwork and have a look at their portfolios. And if you have a good idea of what you want visually, then you can pretty much look at their portfolios to see if they've got something similar in their portfolio that they've worked on before. Now, if you are looking for a production engineer who's going to take a design and move it forward, what you would be looking for is a couple of things. You'd be looking for details in the drawings. Now, you will see a few people post up line drawings, like technical drawings, like you can see right now on your screen. But some of them actually don't really tell you much about the design. A line drawing is something we send to a manufacturer to tell them exactly how we want something. So a line drawing that you would get from a really good production engineer has everything. It will have the dimensions. It will have also the way to manufacture or assemble something. It will have instructions on how to powder coat, what is acceptable, what isn't. It's actually quite an extensive amount of sheets that you get in your line drawing. Besides the CAD model that you pretty much can get from a designer or a production engineer, the actual 3D rendering, which you can see right now on your screen. Another way to tell a good designer or production engineer is through the tools that they use. Now, there is lots of different tools. There is SketchUp, there is SolidWorks, there's Solid Edge. There's so many different packages that can be used to create a design. Now, I'm not sure what designers usually use. Designers could actually just get amazing results using just a pen and paper. I mean, they can sketch beautiful concepts and renderings. But when you look at it, someone who's actually creating a 3D model, there's a good way to tell how professional these people are. Now, it might be a bit of a biased thing, but for me, if I was going to look at hiring an engineer, I would look at for a particular software they use. I would look at whether they use SolidWorks. I would look at if they use Fusion 360, AutoCAD Inventor, Solid Edge. These are probably the four main ones to look out for. So if you're doing searches, you could actually use those terms to find the appropriate engineer for your application or your product. Now, the next thing is to vet your potential engineers or designers. And some of the questions you can ask them are as follows. So let's put these up. Have you designed and manufactured your own products? This is quite a critical little question. I find that people who have done their own work, like as in taken their own money and had an idea and created a product of their own and had it manufactured, those people will understand you a little bit more, especially if you're just getting started. It's quite easy for people who come out of the industry, engineers, to really not be so concerned about every little cost saving that might be applicable to your design. Now, if you're making your own thing, you obviously want to get the best bang for buck so you can continue on making new products and new things. So I feel that this is quite an important question to ask. Let's move on to the next question. How many products have you taken from design through to production? So this is also quite a critical question to ask your potential designer or engineer. The reason for this is that you want to see what experience they've had. Now, this actually leads on to the next questions, which are you familiar with designing products for injection molding? Are you familiar with tooling used in sheet metal? So these are all leading questions that you can use to sort of gauge whether they're going to be able to have the experience to get your product the best possible chance of success. So, next question. Are you familiar with common stock sizes of raw materials? This is more of a trick question. Now, this kind of will tell you whether the engineer or designer has had experience for real, because when you are designing for products for manufacturing, you generally, to save costs, you will not manufacture every absolute thing. You will go and use stock metal, for example, like sheet metal, or if you're making furniture, ply or bamboo. So you may want to know, well, actually you do have to know when you are designing what thicknesses are available, which will determine how you're going to design the product for assembly. Now, anyone can design just about anything these days. I mean, the tools have gotten so much cheaper than they used to be able to design a product. Now, the problem is that if you don't work from the material point of view, you're going to pretty much have to get custom material made to perhaps, CNC or cut something out of a massive block of bamboo if you didn't realize that, bamboo only comes in particular sheet sizes or particular cross sections. So quite an important question, and that gives you quite a lot of information about the person you possibly may hire. So the next question. Are you familiar with material safety standards for your product category? Some products, for example timber products, will require you to get special permission to import into certain countries. For example, if you're importing to Australia, we have very strict biosecurity laws that require you to have certification, fumigation for that particular material. Now, if you're doing electrical or electronics, you have to concern yourself with radio interference, you have to concern yourself with safety for electrical devices. So you want to work with someone who knows what they're doing. All right, on to the next question. Do you have any experience with overseas manufacturers? Well, it really makes sense to find someone who has worked with overseas manufacturers before. Now, most likely you'll be manufacturing in China, which, most of the world is manufacturing these days. You might find other areas as well, and this will apply to the person where they will have experience working with those countries. But in regards to China, you need to make sure that someone knows how to speak with the Chinese, that understands the culture, that will not offend them when you're actually making suggestions or if you're trying to communicate problems. There's a particular way of talking to the Chinese, and some ways are better than others. All right, on to the next question. Do you have any practical manufacturing experience? Now, this is probably the killer question. There's a lot of people who claim to be designers or engineers that have never ever been on the workshop floor and do not know how machinery works. They do not know how materials behave under cutting conditions. It's really essential for someone to actually have some form of experience. They may not have worked on a production floor, but at least engaged with people and seen how a router or CNC cuts, how tooling is made, how plastic injection molding, how plastic flows through it. And if you do not know, I hope maybe you have some form of a go-to person. Personally, I have quite an extensive group of friends that became friends through my manufacturing career, where I sent products to them to get manufactured, and they came back with problems and told me and taught me on what the problems are, for example, in injection molding, in cutting, wall thicknesses and things like that. So someone who's been in the industry for quite some time will be able to answer most of those questions, or at least be prepared, because they've usually had their wrists slapped a little bit by someone who actually knows what they're talking about. Well, I hope you found this helpful. And if you have any questions or comments, please post them in the comment section below. My name is Mark, and this is Production Engineering.